The year was 2007, when Tony Blair moved out and Gordon Brown moved in, when a smoking ban came into effect in all enclosed public spaces in England, when Steve McLaren was replaced as England manager by Fabio Capello, and when our representative at the Eurovision Song Contest was Scooch with the song Flying the Flag for You. I was 17 years old. I completed my first year at college and rolled on into the second year, starting a national diploma course. If you bumped into anyone that knew me back then, the first thing that they'd tell you is that I absolutely adored Status Quo. I had discovered the band in 1997, and a decade later was arguably an all-time high for my fandom of the band. The Quo were pretty much never off my MP3 player at that time. They pumped me through so many essays and just times sat alone at lunchtime and when going out for walks and stuff. They were just there constantly as a friend for comfort and for musical friendship. You know, I learnt those songs inside and out, the ones that I had at that time. This was a period in my education where I think I would literally try and shoehorn Quo into absolutely anywhere that I could. I was studying media production and media studies, and so Quo feature quite a lot in those types of things. When I needed music for something, for a film, for educational purposes, I would put in a Quo track. When I needed to write about something, I think I once had to write a thing about music videos, and literally the entire thing was about Status Quo and the various music videos that they had made, from the story ones of the 80s to just straight band videos in the 70s and 60s, of course. And when I had to study a photo, I'd find an album cover or a band shot, something like that. I remember being tasked with finding a photograph from a specific photographer or something, and I found one called Backwater, and I was so excited. And I guess the lecturers and everybody around me wouldn't have understood the reference, but to me, I was like, I'm going to pick that one because it's literally called Backwater. Quo, yeah, Quo rule, Quo forever. This was my mindset then, and now to perhaps much more balanced level, I think. My home time was spent listening to the band's albums on vinyl and CD, sometimes cassette. My summer was spent air guitaring to their riffs, and once news of the new album was out there, it was just a case of anticipating the release of that. Now, before we get onto that subject in a little more detail, this was also the year that I saw the band live on stage in real life for the first time. It was at a festival in Skegness, in Fantasy Island car park, I believe, supported by the Animals, who were very good. Quo, when I saw them on stage, walking onto the stage, I remember crying my eyes out, because you know that moment where you realize for a thing like you've been watching the videos for a decade at this point, I'd been listening to the music obsessively. They were essentially my life up until that point. And then you realize they are real. They're real people about to play real music in front of you. You know, that I can't explain it really. It really is one of those things where it must sound a little off to some people to go, well, of course they're real. Of course they are. Yeah, but when you see them in person for the first time, that really is an emotional moment. That concert was so good. They were so tight, so rehearsed, and they just knocked it out of the park, and I knew that they would. I actually wrote about my experience of that first concert in the book Goin' Quoin', which I believe is still available. I'll leave the buy link in the description below. Along with the overwhelmed and extremely excited feeling from that concert, this was also the time that Beginning of the End came out as a single. And there was that memorable video on the London Eye, directed by John Keeling. The band looked like they were having an amazing time. They looked so kind of energetic. And the song itself just sounded fresh. The guitars were really high up in the mix, and the lyrics were quite topical as well. Next, the album In Search of the Fourth Chord was released, and I must admit that I didn't really get the significance of the artwork at that point, maybe even the title as well, because I hadn't seen anything in the Indiana Jones franchise. I think I bought it on video with the idea of watching the first one, never got round to it, never really studied the artwork or anything to do with it, and I didn't realize the connection fully until I read it on Wikipedia and brought it up with some friends at college, and they were like, well, duh, I didn't know at that time. The title, In Search of the Fourth Chord, obviously refers to the free chord jibe that Quo often gets. And to be honest, a lot of the time I was a little bit embarrassed by the title, because anybody who's listened to more than 2 tracks of Quo knows that they use a lot more than 3 chords. And I was at college at the time, and teenagers can be pretty blunt, especially about somebody in 2007 under a certain age who likes Status Quo. And so I kind of ignored that a little bit, no matter how difficult it was. Well, no, actually, I think sometimes I would bite back because, got to defend the Quo. But yeah, that title and the artwork didn't really do me any favors when it came to that. I remember the anticipation for this album. It was the first to be produced by Pip Williams since Don't Stop, although I didn't really know that at the time. I hadn't really dug that deep. I knew him at that moment in time as the producer of Rockin' All Over the World, Whatever You Want, and the If You Can't Stand the Heat albums. And so I was really excited after hearing those and then thinking, what's it going to sound like? I mean, I loved what Mike Paxman had done with the band previously, but I was excited for what could emerge. I was determined to get this album the day it came out because for the first time, I was of an age where I had some spare money, and so I could buy it the day in which it was released, because in previous times I got albums maybe 3 to 6 months later, sometimes 2 to 3 years later afterwards, because you'd be waiting for somebody to buy it for birthday or Christmas. This was the first time I had the money to be able to get it the day that it came out. I had a bit of a snag though, because I was at college that day. Sometimes I'd walk into town at lunch break or something. I couldn't do it that day for whatever reason. There was obviously too many lectures in the way. And so I asked my nan to pick it up for me. And I came back, saw it on my bed, I think. And I messaged my dad and I said, I've got the album. I've got it here. I'm the first one to get it out of the two of us. And I remember him messaging back saying, I didn't realize it was a race. Yeah, to be fair, I didn't tell him it was a race. It wasn't a race. We're both fans, and that's fair enough. But it was just the excitement of like, I've got it. It's the first day, look how great this is. And I put it in my player. I had a 1980s hi-fi at that point. So I was getting like the proper old school experience At that point, I was playing a lot of like Just Supposing and that type of thing on there via vinyl. This was fantastic. It sounded amazing. Everything was clear. The guitars mostly up in the mix. A great bass there, like really prominent in that mix. Songs such as the aforementioned Beginning of the End, All Right, Figure of Eight, Bad News, Gravy Train. These were incredible. They had an energy to them that I don't think I'd heard from the band in a while. And I played that album pretty much non-stop for months. I particularly liked the UK bonus track, which was I Ain't Wasting My Time. And I remember walking up to a classroom with my earbuds in, and I was asked to turn the music down because I took my earbud out and just had it there, and it was obviously so loud with this that my lecturer was like, could you turn that down, please? It's a little bit loud. I was listening to it so loud because I was so like tuned into it, and it just, you know what happens when a new Quo album comes out and you just keep listening to it and you keep going, well, this is really a moment in time. This is really it. And even when I listen to it now, I'm still kind of flashed back to that time in 2007 when I was really discovering many different facets of the band. And then this comes out and it's like, bam, there we are, you know. And it seemed that other fans agreed with me, especially with the track Bad News, which was the first original song to feature John Rhino Edwards on vocals. What a track. It had so many kind of little sections in it. I spent many hours kind of listening over it, listening to the different solos and the way that it like calms down and then it builds up into sort of a massive load of guitars and everything. It was just an incredible thing. And it was thrust to the top of the HMV download charts. This was the era where whenever fans heard something they liked, they try and get something together. This was really the time when those download campaigns would you know, burst out to try and get them into the charts. And this was the track. I guess what fans were trying to do was tell the band, this is what we want from the band, this type of thing. It was a real return to form for the entire album, but that track in particular, because of, well, it basically restored the idea of the Status Quo long song at the end of the album. And boy, what a long song. In addition to this CD version of In Search of the Fourth Chord, unusually for the time, there was also a vinyl record one-disc version which omitted tracks and edited some down in order to fit on the record. And at the time, I was actually promised one of these by a relative that just happened to have one there that they were going to give to me. And unfortunately, this never materialized in front of me. And it didn't bother me for a long time because I wasn't really collecting the band on vinyl at that point. I'd sort of given up. I'd had a few records over the years, like Blue for You and stuff, that I'd bought at markets and car boots. But as I saw these albums kind of go into more obscurity, you know, with In Search of the Fourth Chord being there, it sort of felt like this limited thing that if I tried to buy one was going to be too expensive to get one at this point, and it didn't seem worth it. And I missed the reissue in 2014, but I didn't really have the money at that point. And now, 10 years later, Ear Music had some, I believe, in their storage, which they've now re-released. And so 17 years on, I now have a vinyl version of In Search of the Fourth Chord, but unlike that first pressing, this is the entire album spread across 2 records, and it's a gatefold which has the artwork from the booklet, from the CD, and I can't tell you how excited I was to finally get this album on this format all this time later. And it brought back so many memories listening to it. And I am going to review the product in more detail in a future episode. But for the purpose of this one, it brought back so many memories. I think I cried when I saw it, when I held it in my hands and I was like, finally, I've got one here. And I bet it's going to sound amazing. And I can tell you, it really does. Because the album itself, all this time later, looking at it from a much more adult perspective and having heard Quo material in the meantime, it's so atmospheric now. It's probably their most atmospheric since arguably Just Supposing or Never Too Late, because there's a real atmosphere going through the entire thing, because it sounds like a band completely together with a few bits and pieces, a few kind of production tricks in there, but it's an album with a real energy. And despite the artwork, which I must say, even though I was never really a fan of this artwork, seeing it blown up, as I say, did make me cry, and it kind of deserves to be blown up now. I like it. I like it. I like it. Anyway, that was 2007 for me. Anyway, to wrap this up, 2007 ranks as one of my best years. I have so many amazing memories from it, most of which are contributed to the music and the idea of Status Quo. So tell me, do you have a year that you feel you were at your highest in terms of Quo fandom, either because of anticipation of new album or a series of concerts, whatever it is? Let me know in the comments below.